She's too old to fight us." That's what I heard, their voices low, confident and cruel. My own son and his wife. They thought I was asleep. They thought I was weak. But that night, I realized I was living with strangers who wore the faces of family, and that betrayal lit a fire in me I never thought I had. My name's Lucille, and I'm 73 years old. Before we go any further, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? I love knowing where my stories reach. Whether you're in Georgia, Texas, or somewhere across the ocean, I want you to settle in. Because what I'm about to tell you could happen to anyone. It happened to me, right under my own roof. After my husband Robert passed, the house felt too quiet. Every creak in the hallway reminded me he wasn't there anymore. We'd built that home together, board by board, over 40 years. The garden, the oak tree out front, even the old porch swing. It was all part of us. So when my son Eddie and his wife Amanda said they wanted to move in for a little while to help me around, I said yes. I thought it would bring life back into the house. Instead, it brought something else entirely. At first, it was small things. Amanda took over the kitchen, saying she'd make things easier. I didn't mind. Grief had made me tired. Then she started changing little details, new curtains, new paint, new rules. "We should modernize it," she said one afternoon, brushing her manicured hand along my husband's old armchair. "These old things make the place look gloomy." Old things. Like me, I suppose. Still, I smiled and nodded, trying to keep peace. That's what we mothers do, don't we? We fold our pain neatly into silence and call it love. But silence can be mistaken for weakness. And that's exactly what they mistook mine for. Over the months, they made themselves comfortable. Too comfortable. Eddie changed the mail address to his name, saying it would make bill payments simpler. Amanda began receiving guests, sometimes without telling me. I'd walk into my own living room to find her friends sipping wine, their laughter echoing off my husband's photographs on the wall. "Lucille, sweetheart," Amanda said once, waving her hand like I was a guest, "we're just trying to make this house feel more youthful." I wanted to tell her this house didn't need youth, it needed respect, but my son's eyes, tired, distracted, told me not to start a fight, so I bit my tongue. Weeks turned into months, and I began to notice more subtle things. My bedroom, the master, was moved for better lighting, she said. They took the large one, the one with the bay window Robert had built for me, and gave me the small guest room at the back of the house. I didn't protest. I told myself it was temporary. Then one evening, I passed by the living room on my way to the kitchen. The door was slightly open, and I heard them talking. Amanda's tone was sharp, amused. "She won't last much longer," she said, "and once she's gone, we can finally do what we want with this place." Eddie chuckled softly. "Don't say that, babe. She might hear you." Amanda's voice lowered to a hiss. "Please. She's too old to fight us." The world went silent. I stood there, hand on the doorframe, my heart pounding so loud it drowned their laughter. I didn't push the door open. I didn't scream. I just turned and walked back to that little back room, the one they'd given me, and sat on the edge of the bed. It felt like I was sitting inside my own grave. I stared at the floral wallpaper Robert had chosen years ago and whispered to myself, "Too old to fight?" The words burned more than any insult could, because they didn't see me anymore, just my age, just my frailty, just their chance. That night, I didn't sleep. I listened to the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, the wind pressing against the window, all the quiet things that reminded me I was still alive. And as the moonlight crept across the floorboards, I made myself a promise. They thought I was finished. They were wrong. That was the night I decided to take back my life, my home, and my dignity, no matter what it cost me. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table staring into my coffee. The house was quiet, too quiet. Even the birds seemed hesitant to sing. I kept hearing Amanda's words loop through my head like a cruel song. "She's too old to fight us." She said it so casually, as if I were already gone. Eddie came in, half-dressed for work, scrolling through his phone. "Morning, Mom," he mumbled, grabbing a piece of toast without looking at me. "Morning," I said softly. He didn't notice the tremble in my voice, or maybe he did and chose to ignore it. That hurt even more. Amanda followed soon after, clicking across the tiles in her heels. The scent of her expensive perfume filled the air, sharp and artificial, cutting through the familiar smell of my home. "Lucille," she said brightly, "I was thinking we should move your things into the smaller room near the garden. It'll get more sunlight, and it's easier for you to access the backyard." She smiled sweetly, but I could see it. That flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. They weren't helping me. They were pushing me out. That's how it began. The walls started closing in, not all at once, but quietly, like ivy creeping up a house until the windows disappear. I was no longer allowed to cook because the stove was too heavy for me. My mail stopped arriving in my name because Eddie's handling the finances now. The family photos I'd hung for decades were taken down for redecorating. My late husband's portrait vanished from the mantel. When I asked where it went, Amanda said, "Oh, it clashed with the new decor." Clashed. As if his memory were an outdated piece of furniture. Sometimes I'd walk into the living room to find Amanda and her friends drinking wine in their designer clothes, laughing at things I didn't understand. I'd quietly retreat to the kitchen, invisible in my own house. One evening, I overheard one of them whisper, "I don't know how you do it living with your mother-in-law." Amanda laughed. "Oh, it's temporary. She's fading." That word, fading, dug into my chest. Eddie used to call me every Sunday after church when he was younger. He'd tell me about his work, his dreams, his plans. But now when I spoke, he barely listened. If I tried to talk about the house or my worries, he'd sigh. "Mom, please, Amanda's just trying to help. Don't make everything a problem." The tone was gentle but dismissive, the way you talk to a child who doesn't understand. I remember one rainy afternoon vividly. I found my husband's old toolbox outside, soaked and rusting near the garbage bins. That box had been his pride, filled with tools from his father, passed down like a legacy. I brought it inside, clutching it to my chest. When Amanda saw me, she frowned. "Oh, that old thing? I thought it was junk." I stared at her speechless. "Robert's tools are not junk," I whispered. She shrugged. "Well, it's just taking up space. We're trying to declutter." Declutter, as if I were next on the list. That night, I sat by the window in the small back room, watching the rain trail down the glass. Every droplet looked like a memory sliding away on the laughter, the dinners, the life Robert and I built. I realized I wasn't living in my home anymore. I was surviving in theirs. I began noticing their whispers more often, the sudden hush when I entered a room, the exchanged looks, the way Amanda's hand lingered too long on envelopes that came in my name. My heart told me something was coming, something cruel and deliberate. One evening, while clearing dishes, I caught Amanda's reflection in the window. She was smiling to herself, scrolling through something on her phone. Then she said, almost to no one, "Soon, we'll finally make it ours." I froze. Ours. That single word turned my suspicion into dread. When I went to bed that night, I tucked the deed papers, the ones Robert and I had kept in a drawer for decades, under my pillow. Something inside me whispered that they wouldn't be safe for long, and as I lay there listening to the rain soften against the roof, I realized the truth. I was already under siege. The home I built with love was being stolen one quiet act at a time, and soon they'd make their move. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes disguised as kindness. A few weeks after that rainy night, Amanda came to me with a folder in her hand and a syrupy smile that could have fooled anyone but God. "Lucille," she said, sliding the papers across. The kitchen table. These are just some updates for the insurance and utilities. To make sure things keep running smoothly in case, well, emergencies. Her voice softened at that last word, emergencies, like she was doing me a favor. Eddie stood behind her, leaning against the counter with that same distracted look. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I remember thinking, why can't he look at me? I hesitated. What kind of updates? Amanda sighed sweetly, as if I were a child. Oh, nothing major. Just formalities. The house, the bills, all that boring stuff. We'll take care of it for you. My heart tightened. I looked down at the papers. So many pages with legal words swimming across them like a foreign language. I didn't understand most of it. But Eddie nodded, saying softly, "It's fine, Mom. Just sign it so we can manage things for you." And I did. Because that's what mothers do. We trust our children even when something deep inside tells us not to. I signed my name on the dotted line that night, not realizing I was giving away more than permission. I was signing away my home, the last piece of Robert I had left. A month later, I went to renew my driver's license. The clerk at the counter asked for proof of address. I handed her a copy of my utility bill. She glanced at it, frowned, and said, "Ma'am, this isn't in your name. It's listed under Edward and Amanda Brooks." I laughed nervously. "Oh, that must be a mistake." She shook her head. "You might want to check that with your family." I went home trembling. Every step through the front door felt heavier. I wanted to confront Eddie right then, but he was at work. Amanda was lounging on the couch, scrolling her phone, a glass of white wine on the table. "Amanda," I said carefully, "why is my name missing from the bills?" She didn't even look up. "Oh, that. We just put them under Eddie's name. It's easier for taxes." "Then why is my address under his, too?" She looked up then, her expression cold. "Because this house is his now." For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. My ears rang so loud the world seemed to tilt. "What did you say?" Amanda set down her phone and crossed her legs. "You signed the transfer papers last month, remember? Everything's official. The house belongs to Eddie now." The room spun. I could barely breathe. "Transfer papers?" "Yes," she said, smiling faintly. "You agreed to let us handle things for you. Don't worry, you can stay here as long as you like. We'll take care of everything." Take care of everything. Her words sounded like a coffin lid closing. I stumbled into my room and locked the door, my hands shaking as I pulled out the file drawer Robert had built beneath the dresser. The deed, the one we'd kept safe for 40 years, was gone. I sat on the floor, clutching my chest, the realization hitting. Like ice water. I had signed away my home. Tears came, but not the kind that fall quickly. They came slow, heavy, old. I thought about Robert, about how proud he'd been when we paid off the final mortgage, how he'd kissed me under that oak tree and said, "We built this, Lucy. It's ours, forever. Forever." And yet with one signature, I'd let them erase that word. The next morning, my friend Martha came by. She was an old church friend, the kind who could see pain even when you tried to hide it. She noticed my swollen eyes and sat down quietly beside me. "What happened, Lucy?" I told her everything. Every cruel word, every paper, every whisper. When I finished, she took my trembling hand. "My cousin's a lawyer," she said softly. "He deals with elder cases, people who've been taken advantage of. Maybe you should talk to him." I shook my head. "I can't do that, Martha. He's my son." She held my hand tighter. "Maybe he already stopped being one, honey." That night, I didn't sleep again. I sat in the dark, clutching my husband's old wedding ring that I wore on a chain. And for the first time since he died, I prayed not for peace, but for strength. Because love had built this home. But now it would take courage to save it. For a few days after that night, I moved like a ghost through my own home. I cooked in silence, cleaned what wasn't mine anymore, slept in a room that suddenly felt borrowed. I didn't cry anymore. That stage had passed. What came next was quieter, heavier, like a storm gathering before dawn. Amanda carried herself differently now. There was a new sharpness in her tone, a confidence that made my stomach twist. She'd walk past me humming, her voice sweet but smug. Once she even patted my shoulder and said, "You'll be so much more comfortable when you don't have to worry about this place anymore." That word, comfortable, had never sounded so cruel, but life has a way of planting the right people beside you when you're about to fall apart. And for me, that was Martha. She came by that Sunday afternoon carrying a basket of peach cobbler and a look that meant business. "I've been thinking about what you told me," she said, setting the basket down, "and I called my cousin, Mr. Gaines. He's retired now, but still takes a few cases. He said he'll see you." I hesitated. "Martha, I can't afford a lawyer." She waved her hand. "He's doing it as a favor. Says it's his duty to protect what's right." I stared at the basket for a long time before nodding. "All right, but we'll keep it quiet." The next morning, I dressed carefully. Light blue blouse, gray slacks, my husband's old watch. I told Amanda I was going to the pharmacy. She barely looked up from her phone. "Okay, don't forget your pills." When I stepped outside, the sunlight felt like freedom. I hadn't felt that in months. Mr. Gaines' office was in an old brick building downtown, the kind with creaky floors and the smell of paper and time. He was in his late 70s, thin and sharp-eyed, with a voice that could slice through lies like butter. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, shaking my hand, "Martha told me a bit. Let's start from the beginning." I told him everything. The papers, the signatures, the missing deed, Amanda's words. He listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting down notes in a neat, deliberate hand. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "What they did," he said slowly, "is called elder financial exploitation. It's illegal, and you have grounds to challenge it. Those papers you signed, if you were misled, coerced, or didn't understand them, they can be invalidated." My heart thudded in my chest. "You mean I can get my house back?" He smiled faintly. "It's possible, but you must be patient and quiet. Don't confront them yet. Let me gather records, bank statements, signatures. The quieter we work, the stronger we'll strike." I sat there in stunned silence. For months, I'd felt like a shadow, but now someone saw me. Not as old, not as weak, but as worth fighting for. Before I left, he said something that stayed with me. "Mrs. Brooks, people often mistake age for helplessness. They forget. Time teaches you how to wait, how to watch, and when to act." Back home, Amanda was in the garden on the phone, laughing about something. I walked past her without a word. Inside, I opened my old journal, the one Robert gave me years ago, and began to write again. March 15th. They took my name off the deed, but they will never take my will. Each night after that, I wrote down everything. Dates, times, conversations. It became my quiet ritual, my weapon. I started keeping copies of every envelope that arrived, noting which ones Amanda hid. I found the notary's stamp from the documents I'd signed and took a photo on Martha's old flip phone. Every detail became a piece of the puzzle I was building. Eddie barely spoke to me those days. When he did, it was short and cold. "You've been quiet, Mom. Everything okay?" I'd smile and say, "Just tired, dear. You know how it is." He didn't know how much power lived in those words, because tired doesn't mean done. One evening, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Silver hair, soft wrinkles, but eyes that looked alive again. I whispered to myself, "You thought I couldn't fight. You forgot who raised you." And for the first time in a long while, I slept peacefully, because the plan had begun, quiet, steady, and unstoppable, just like me. Sometimes revenge doesn't need shouting. Sometimes all it takes is patience, the kind that only comes with age. Over the next few weeks, I played my part carefully. I smiled when Amanda spoke to me. I nodded when Eddie pretended everything was fine. But behind those quiet gestures, Mr. Gaines and I were preparing something far louder than words could ever be. He had begun collecting evidence, forged signatures, altered bank transfers, witness statements from the notary who'd been paid extra to overlook a few details. Each revelation was like pulling back another layer of rot I hadn't known existed. Every time I sat in his office, I felt that same strange mix of pain and power. Pain for the son I'd lost to greed, and power because, for the first time, I was doing something about it. One morning, Amanda came to me in the kitchen with her arms crossed. Her lipstick was perfect, her smile tight. "Lucille," she said, "Eddie and I have been talking. We think it's time you moved into a senior community. Somewhere nice, peaceful. You deserve that." I looked up from my teacup. "Oh?" "Yes," she continued, voice sugary and fake. "It's just, this house is a lot to manage. And with the market so good right now, we could sell it and use part of the money to make sure you're comfortable." I felt my heart thump. The audacity was breathtaking. "So you'd sell the house," I said slowly, "and put me in a home?" Amanda smiled. "Don't make it sound so harsh. We're just trying to plan ahead." Plan ahead. The words tasted poisonous. I gave her my sweetest smile. "That's very thoughtful of you, dear. Let me think about it." She grinned, thinking she'd won. "Of course. Take your time, but not too long. Houses like this won't stay on the market." When she left, I sat perfectly still. My hands were trembling, but not from fear anymore. From anticipation, because they had no idea what was coming. That evening, I called Mr. Gaines. "It's time," I said. He didn't ask for details. "Then let's begin." Within a week, the paperwork was filed. Claims of fraudulent transfer, financial exploitation of a senior, and motion for emergency injunction. Mr. Gaines worked like a man half his age, determined and precise. "By the time they realize what's happened," he told me, "the court will already have acted." And then, one afternoon, it happened. I was pruning roses in the backyard when Amanda's voice sliced through the air. "What is this?" she screamed. I turned slowly. She was standing by the mailbox waving a large white envelope, thick, official-looking. Eddie was beside her, pale and confused. I took off my gloves, brushed the dirt from my hands, and walked over. "Something wrong?" She tore open the envelope, scanning it quickly before looking up at me, her face twisted with disbelief. It's an eviction notice, addressed to us." I nodded gently. "Yes, that sounds about right." Eddie blinked. "Mom, what is this?" I met his eyes. The same eyes that once looked at me with love, now filled with guilt and panic. "It's justice, Eddie. I told you once that this house was built with love. Turns out, love can still defend itself when it's cornered." Amanda's face reddened. "You can't do this. We own this place." I smiled, calm and unshaken. "No, dear, you forged it. The law disagrees with you now." For a moment, the only sound was the rustling of the oak leaves overhead. Then Amanda threw the envelope down, storming toward the door. Eddie followed, muttering under his breath. "How could you, Mom?" I whispered back. "You left me no choice." They slammed the door behind them. I stood on that porch, breathing in the heavy evening air. My hands still smelled faintly of roses, thorns and all. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again. Same spot where this nightmare began. But this time, I wasn't trembling. The legal process had only just begun. There would be hearings, documents, signatures. But the balance of power had shifted. The walls that once closed in on me were finally pushing them out. Mr. Gaines called later to confirm. "The court's ruling favors you. They'll have 30 days to vacate." I thanked him, voice trembling. I never thought I'd win. He chuckled softly. "You didn't win, Mrs. Brooks. You reclaimed what was already yours." When I hung up, I stared at the family photos Amanda had taken down but never destroyed. I'd found them hidden in a box in the attic. I set them back on the mantel one by one, wiping away the dust. And as the clock ticked past midnight, I whispered to Robert's picture, "They thought I was too old to fight, darling. Turns out, I just needed the right fight." The days that followed felt both long and fleeting, like standing in a storm where everything you love is being shaken loose, yet you know it's exactly what needed to happen. Eddie and Amanda stopped speaking to me after that evening. For a while, the house was filled with a strange, tense silence. No laughter, no chatter, just footsteps, doors closing, drawers slamming. I moved quietly through the spaces that used to feel like mine, listening to their angry whispers from the hallway. "She set us up," Amanda hissed one night. "She's my mother," Eddie muttered. "Then she's a vindictive one," she snapped. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Every morning, the court order sat on the fridge, a reminder that truth was finally on my side. They began packing slowly, like people refusing to believe the inevitable. Eddie would come home late, his eyes red-rimmed, avoiding me entirely. Sometimes I'd hear him muttering on the phone, probably to lawyers, maybe to friends, maybe just to the ghosts of guilt. And Amanda? She strutted around pretending not to care, blasting music in the afternoons, throwing her perfume through the air like armor. But every time she passed me, she flinched, just slightly, when she caught the calm in my eyes. The morning, they finally left. I stood on the porch as a moving truck pulled up. Eddie walked past me carrying boxes, his shoulders slumped. Amanda barked orders at the movers, snapping her fingers, her perfect manicure trembling no matter how hard she tried to hide it. When Eddie came out for the last time, he stopped in front of me. He couldn't look me in the eyes. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. I took a deep breath. "Didn't I? You took my home, Eddie. You made me a stranger in the life I built." He winced, still staring at the ground. "I thought we were helping." "No," I said softly. "You thought I was helpless." He finally looked up, and I saw it there. The shame. The boy I raised flickered behind the man who betrayed me. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. I nodded slowly. "I know you are. But sorry doesn't rebuild trust. That takes time. And honesty." Amanda appeared behind him, arms crossed. "You've ruined everything," she spat. "You'll die alone in this house, you know that?" I smiled faintly. "Then I'll die at peace, dear. Something money can't buy." Her face twisted, but she didn't answer. She stormed to the car, slamming the door. Eddie hesitated for a moment longer, then followed her. As the moving truck rolled away, the dust lifted in the sunlight, dancing like tiny ghosts of what once was. I stood there watching until they disappeared down the road, the oak tree's branches swaying gently above me, and just like that, the house was quiet again. But this time, it was a peaceful quiet. That afternoon, Mr. Gaines came by to drop off the final documents. Title restored, property secured. He placed the folder gently on the kitchen table. "It's officially yours again, Mrs. Brooks, completely and legally." I smiled through tears I hadn't realized were falling. "You've given me back more than a house, Mr. Gaines." He adjusted his glasses, smiling kindly. "You did that yourself. You just needed someone to remind you that you still could." After he left, I walked through every room, touching the walls, the furniture, the windows, reclaiming each piece of my life. I found my husband's portrait in that same attic box and placed it back above the fireplace where it belonged. The air felt lighter. The house breathed again. I spent that evening sitting on the porch, watching the sunset spill gold over the yard. For the first time in months, I made tea, real tea, in my favorite porcelain cup. I could almost hear Robert's voice in the wind. "You did good, Lucy. You came home." A tear slipped down my cheek, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from relief. Because justice isn't loud. It's quiet, steady, and deeply human. That night, I wrote one last line in my journal. They thought they owned my house, but all they ever owned was their greed. And as the stars came out, I closed my eyes and smiled. In the weeks that followed, peace became something I had to learn again. Not the soft, gentle kind, but the sort that grows only after a storm has passed through and left everything changed. I'd wake early each morning to the sound of wind brushing against the oak tree outside. For months, that sound had made me ache with loneliness. Now it felt like a hymn, a quiet reminder that I was still here, still standing, still me. The house felt different, too, lighter. The air no longer carried Amanda's perfume or the tension of unspoken cruelty. Every creak, every echo now belonged to me again. I started cooking in the kitchen without feeling like I was intruding. The smell of biscuits and coffee filled the rooms just like it used to when Robert was alive. I caught myself humming sometimes, softly, without meaning to. It was the sound of life coming back. A few neighbors started stopping by when they saw me gardening again. Mrs. Turner from down the street brought lemon pie and said, "We miss seeing you out here, Lucille." That simple sentence nearly broke me. For months I'd been invisible in my own neighborhood, trapped behind the walls of shame and silence. And now, just hearing someone say, "We missed you," made me feel human again. Martha visited often, too. She'd sit on the porch swing with me, both of us sipping sweet tea, the late afternoon sun painting the yard gold. "You know," she said one day, "you could have given up 100 times, but you didn't. That's what makes this story yours." I smiled at her. Maybe. Or maybe God just gave me the right friends at the right time. One afternoon, while sorting through old boxes, I found a letter Robert had written years ago, tucked inside one of his toolkits. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting faint, but the words were clear. "If you're reading this, Lucy, it means I'm not there to say it. Don't ever let anyone make you small in your own home. You were always the strong one, even when you didn't feel it." I held that letter for a long time, tears spilling freely now. Not from hurt, but from gratitude. He had known me better than anyone. He had trusted that even in the face of betrayal, I'd find my way back to myself. And I had. A few weeks later, Eddie called. His voice was hesitant, almost boyish again. "Mom," he said quietly, "I just wanted to check if you're okay." There was a long silence before I answered. "I am," I said softly, "and I hope you are too." "I'm trying," he admitted. Amanda left. She said she couldn't deal with it anymore. I closed my eyes. "Eddie, you made mistakes. Big ones. But you're still my son. Just don't ever confuse love with ownership again." His voice broke slightly. "I won't. I promise." When I hung up, I didn't feel anger or pity, just a strange calm. Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It just releases the hold it has on your heart. Now every Sunday I sit on the porch with a slice of lemon pie, watching the sun dip behind the oak tree Robert planted when Eddie was born. I think about how fragile love can be, and how strong you become when you decide to stand up for yourself, even if it means standing alone. This house isn't just brick and wood. It's memory, history, and proof that sometimes the quietest voices can echo the loudest when they finally speak. So if you're listening to this right now, wherever you are, tell me, where are you watching from? Because I want you to remember something. If someone ever makes you feel small, too old, too tired, too powerless to fight, remember me. Remember Lucille. Because wisdom doesn't fade with age. It sharpens. And when the time comes to defend what's yours, you won't need to shout. You'll just need to stand. They said I was too old to fight. I whisper to the empty porch, the wind carrying my words away like prayers. Turns out I just needed the right reason. And as the evening light wraps around me, I feel it again. That same quiet fire still burning within. The one betrayal tried to kill, but never could.